right, so let's get more reaction to the budget speech of the Finance Minister, and the South African Communist Party spokesperson, Alex Mashilo, joins me in studio now. Mr. Mashilo, thank you very much for your time. So you describe this budget as a source of serious national conflict in society. Why would you use such strong words?
Because we have approximately 10.4 million people who are unemployed, and we are referring here to both active and discouraged work seekers. And in that context, you go for workers through the wage bill. And if you looked at the statistics, workers in the public service generally support an average family of about 7. Now, they would have made plans in their lives based on the collective bargaining agreement that the government has signed with them. It is a multi-year agreement, so those agreements move from about 2 to 3 years. So you have made your plans. You know that based on this agreement, my income is expected to grow by this much. And then here comes the budget that says, no, the income is not going to grow by that much, but in addition, we've got to cut the size of the public service and throw others into unemployment. So once you are doing that, you are inviting those affected to fight back.
The minister is under pressure from ratings agency Moody's, for example, and the very ratings agency we speak about has been at pains to point out the very same issue of the public debt that is ballooning. The question here is, what should the minister have done differently?
Firstly, let's look historically as to how we arrived where we are. Post-1994, there was no radical restructuring in our economy to rid it of its colonial futures. We still depended largely on mineral extraction and export and income from the export of those minerals, which is why our economy, a fact he didn't mention when he presented the budget, grew by an average of about 5% in the mid-2000s. If you remember very well, during that period, there was a global commodity boom, right? It was a super cycle, so minerals were performing. According to a study by the IDC, even during that period, our economy didn't perform very well due to the fact of a lack of infrastructure sufficiently supporting the mining industry, and of course other problems in the mining sector. During that period, we also had an increase in public spending. There was this announcement of the 2010 World Cup. There were roads construction, there were stadia, and so on. Massive amounts. So our economy was moving. Now, if you say our economy was growing during that particular period without taking us through, working with us to say, these are the reasons why we were growing. Now, following the 2008 crisis, the world economy plummeted. China came down, and in China, the country I have visited several times since then, they are talking about a new normal. Their economy has gone down to about 6%. It is hovering around that particular point, and it is no longer drawing more of mineral imports, and other economies went down. As a result, we are not growing. So there are two things. Internally, we have adopted poor policies. Externally, there is a crisis environment. We are growing. This is the context. We are not growing. This is the context in which the budget was presented. Now, the minister has to choose. South Africa is a sovereign country. We've got democratic national sovereignty. You either listen to South African or you listen to foreign monopoly interests. If you do so, we are going to elections. South Africans elect the government. If you continue ignoring the pleas of South Africans in the context of these high levels of inequality, unemployment, and poverty, you are generating a fight back. Already in the country, there is this movement called this must shut down, this must shut down.
Yes.
You must look at that movement as responding or reacting to tough economic challenges on the ground.
You've painted a very nice context in as far as the history of this country's economy. The question that faces us here and now is whether or not the budget presented is the kind of budget that will stave off a ratings downgrade, which will be detrimental to the growth of the very economy you speak about. But also importantly, how is the Ramaphosa administration meant to appease all sides. It's a catch-22.
It's a catch in a way, but the president said something very important in the State of the Nation address on the 13th of February. He said that if you borrow for consumption and if you borrow from one financier in order to pay another, you are running into trouble. The state must appreciate that the neoliberal economics that plunged the world into crisis into 2008 was discredited. The state has a role to play in productive activity. Unless the state invests in the economy to generate revenue to support developmental imperatives, we are not going to go anywhere, because the trajectory that President Cyril Ramaphosa, President Zuma, President Beki were locked in up to now was that of traveling to Davos, traveling all over the world to ask for investment, and they will be given conditionalities. Foreign direct investment will not be growing.
We're out of time, Mr. Mashilo. Yes or no? Is this an austerity budget?
This is an austerity budget. Look, there is this 261 billion rand cut, and if truth be told, this budget is not going to grow the economy. It is not also going to help us repay our debt, because the cut is going to attack areas that we need to achieve economic growth. So you are not going to have the economic growth you need in order to service the debt plus the interests.
All right. Alex Mashilo, he speaks for the South African Communist Party. Thank you very much for your time. All right. That brings us to the end of the Thursday edition of the First